live. So, welcome to Inner Self Podcast, where I am your host, Marshall Little, and where we discuss everything in terms of self development, whether it's mental health awareness, just ways for overall improvement and holistic health and fitness. So, for this episode, I'm going to be discussing on thinking traps and how to avoid thinking traps. So, first, to go into what thinking traps are. Thinking traps are a cognitive bias, or they are cognitive biases that lead us to think in certain ways that aren't helpful to us. Um, we all experience them to some degree. But I think that it is super important to be aware of them so that we can work to combat them and make more thoughtful decisions. So let's talk about different types of thinking traps. All right. All of us have, at some point in our life, have been affected by thinking traps. We've fallen into it, and it, can lead to all sorts of other issues, such as leading us into depression, making poor life decisions. Maybe it causes us to say things that maybe we later on regret because we were going off of emotion as opposed to being able to think critically, think logically, which I know we talked a little bit about the importance of that with the last episode. So, confirmation bias, all right, that is a very common thinking trap. So basically, it's when we speak out or seek out information and opinions that confirm what we already believe. The bandwagon effect occurs when we decide to do something simply because other people are doing it. So, like following the crowd. Um, and the halo effect happens, which is when we tend to view someone positively in general because of one's positive experience. So when we look at stuff like that, kind of following the crowd, you see whatever big, trends are going on. Like social media is one of the worst. I think that social media it's a blessing and a curse. In the sense that we have at our fingertips, we're able to keep in touch with friends, family, people, we meet along in our lives. And, you can kind of see from afar, people will post like family photos or like, oh, I just got this new job, just had a kid, just got married, so on and so forth. So, obviously, those are the positives of social media. I think the negatives are, you tend to see, I think it can consume a lot of people in the sense that they start going down that bandwagon effect because they see all these like common posts on, social media, whether it's, like a certain lifestyle or something like that, and then all of a sudden we start comparing ourselves to other people, but all we're seeing is like a snapshot of whatever their life is. And especially if that is a social media page where the person uses a certain theme or a certain niche in order to kind of market themselves in that manner, and that's the audience that they're trying to hit. So what we don't see though is the rest of their life. So your mind is constantly getting like that dopamine release of all of this social media, all that screen time and everything, and it's a real easy way to pull us away from the realities of everyday life. So, and then like that can cause a lot of people to base their thoughts, their views, their decisions on real life, based off of comparing to, these social media influencers that, are doing those things. Um, so it's a very dangerous trap that one can go down. I think the key to preventing that from happening is just being aware, being aware of it, and being present in the now, and being able to think critically and logically, and understand that this isn't everyday life. This isn't the realities of you know what that person might be going through in real life, or what you maybe even be going through in real life. So um, confirmation bias is a very common one as far as thinking traps, so just something to kind of keep in mind. So now that we've identified some of the most common thinking traps, let's talk about how to avoid them. So what we've going off of what we've already discussed, one way is to be aware of them, and to also pay attention to when they may be influencing your thinking. So when you're able to recognize a thinking trap, it can be helpful to be able to take a step back and look at the situation or issue from multiple perspectives, which can in turn help you see the situation more objectively and make a better decision. I would say another way to avoid thinking traps is to practice thinking critically. Anyone that listens to me, they know I'm huge on this. It's something that I personally constantly try to improve every single day. Being able to think critically, and make good judgments based off of logic and reason. So with this, this means questioning the information you hear or read and evaluating it carefully. One of the big things, I think that's a huge downfall, as time goes on, with the advancements of social media and technology, we tend to grasp on to whatever our biases are, and we don't deep dive into it and look at the whole picture. And that's on any issue, social issue, economic issue, life in general, right? It's easy to fall into that trap, super easy. I've been guilty of it in the past. I think we all have, and I think anyone that says that they haven't, they're lying to themselves, because that's just human nature. Humans, we're tribal. That it's in our DNA. So being able to take that step back and being able to question everything you hear or read, and looking at it and evaluating it carefully, that is a good way to exercise critical thinking. And then, also questioning assumptions, and looking for evidence, can also help you avoid forming opinions based off of faulty reasoning. So this is why, one of the reasons why I'm huge on being so analytical. Can I be too analytical sometimes? Yeah, I think so. And, obviously that's something that I know I'm aware of. And, I try to pick the right times to be analytical about everything. But also, me personally, I think that being um, somewhat overly analytical on stuff, I think it can be very beneficial, especially when it comes to, identifying an issue or a topic and being able to take a step back and, just look at strictly what the data says, you know. Um, Now, obviously, there's like some sociological things that, it's kind of hard to gather data because you're basing it on, human behavior, uh, which is, complex in itself because it's unique to every individual. Um, but being able to look at stuff in that manner, regardless of the situation, it takes you to that step to being able to look at something in a logical manner and to exercise good creative thinking. So, with that obviously is very beneficial, and it really helps us to be able to identify whatever the problem is, or whatever the situation is, and being able to look at it at all angles and question all information instead of just taking everything for face value. um, so that's definitely one big piece of it. um, it can also be helpful to seek out different opinions from people, people that you trust, so it can, with that, this can help you gain a more balanced view of the situation, and can also help you to prevent, yourself from jumping to the conclusion based on a single perspective. So, a good example would be, especially like, let's say if it's a topic on something that I'm not well versed in, I'm not, educated in. Um, I would seek out the opinion of someone who is educated in that area and ask their thoughts on it. Um, and even then, looking at that and receiving that information, with a clear head, um, that way I can take that information back, reflect on it, and be able to make the best educated decision that I can on whatever that specific issue is. Um, Another way too, I mean, even getting more than one person, you could, let's say, I mean, it could be anything from, like a big social issue, that you're unsure of, and you want to kind of get both sides of the spectrum on it. So maybe you talk to two people whom you really trust and get their viewpoints on each end of it and their reasonings why. And then you can kind of gather all that information and be able to, kind of contrast and compare and compile all of that data together for yourself, so you can make the best informed judgment you can on whatever that issue is. So, you know, one thing I would say that has helped me a lot with avoiding thinking traps is being able to, take that step back. If I feel like I'm starting to let my emotions get the best of me, or if I'm like, okay, I might have a biased viewpoint on this unknowingly because of, let's say, whatever my upbringing was, whether it's on a political spectrum or a religious spectrum, or, socioeconomic spectrum, any of those things. Me being able to now take a step back and remove that stuff from my head so I can look at it as clear as possible, has really helped me a lot. I remember like there was a certain topic that I was talking to a friend about, and they were like, "What are your thoughts on this?" And I'm not going to go into details on it, or say who the person was, but ultimately, I was kind of playing devil's advocate on both sides, and my ultimate answer was, I was like, okay, well, I was like, how is this decision going to affect my life or somebody else's life? You know what I mean? And so if it doesn't affect my life or someone else's life, other than someone getting all upset because they have a certain viewpoint on it for whatever their internal biases are, um, then why would I care about it? You know what I mean? So it's being able to do that has definitely helped me in terms of, I would say, like just overall decisions, because it's so so easy, and like even now, like because I'll fight it all the time, whenever I'm like not even thinking about it, and it's so easy to fall into that thinking trap of making a decision like, okay, well, this is my viewpoint on it because this is that's the way I was always brought up, or this is my viewpoint on it because this person did this, as opposed to being able to step back and take all of that stuff out of consideration and kind of look at it, from a clear head and a clear conscience, and being able to, as I discussed earlier with looking at it through multiple perspectives, being able to see all the different directions, um, that kind of go to this one problem. And doing that is extremely beneficial for myself, and I think it could definitely be beneficial for anyone listening to this. Um, it's the human mind, it's crazy when you think about it, because it's such a complex organism that we still only use a small percentage of the total brain. And that's why whenever someone says, well, I can't change on my viewpoint on this, or or that person, they're never going to change their views on that, and it's like, no, they can change, they can 100% change. um, it's them wanting to be able to change, and it's them wanting to be able to have that goal of becoming a more, um, I wouldn't want to really use the term cerebral, but I would say just a more self-aware individual. Um, with them being able to do that, and them wanting to do that, if they really want to do it, they can. Like, and that's because like the mind is able to make those changes, make those adjustments and everything. And I will say that I am one example of that. I know, comparing myself to me 10 years ago, like even just in general, on how I respond to certain things that might have triggered me at that time, like now, it's like it doesn't even really faze me. And even then, if I feel like, okay, I'm not going to be able to make a decision right now on this, or I'm not going to be able to have a constructive conversation on this, then I will pull myself back. I'll be like, hey, I need a minute um, to absorb this and to think about it. with a clear head. That way, I can keep this entire conversation, this flow of back and forth information constructive. Um, Otherwise, if I try and do it now, then I'm not thinking logically, and I'm going to end up falling into one of these thinking traps. You know, it definitely takes practice, and it definitely takes people wanting to do it. Like, you have to want to do it. Um, because if you don't, then you're not going to put in the effort, So you got to be able to look at all of this and add it to a part of whatever your holistic journey is for you, in life on becoming the best version of you possible. And this is just one small step and one small tool that can kind of catapult everything else for you. I know me personally, it has helped so much. So being able to kind of take all of that stuff in and being able to really want to do it, it's going to benefit you in the long term. And I'm a firm believer in that. It's not easy. I mean, it's still not easy. And anyone that knows me, like, yeah, I can still be hard headed at times with certain things. I'm human. We're all human. But I can definitely do a better job now than I used to. A lot better job now than I used to on being able to take a step back if I feel myself going down one of these thinking traps. And that's something that, I continue to work on, because it kind of goes back to, anyone that's listened to me before, one of the things I always say, self-development, it's a lifelong process. Learning, it's lifelong. And that should be our goal, because we only have one life on this planet. So why wouldn't we make it our goal to be the best versions of us that we can be possible? And not fall into the bandwagon, trap that discussed earlier, and comparing ourselves to other people, because you can't compare yourself to anyone else but you. If you try and compare yourself to others, then you're not going to grow like you should. Always compare yourself to the person who you were compared to the person who you are now compared to the person who you were yesterday. I think and I forgot where I read that, but it's so true when you think about it, because you still want to live in the now. You still want to enjoy, the moment and whatnot, and also be able to look ahead and not dwell on the past. So being able, that kind of keeps you motivated to continue moving forward, is being able to, compare yourself to the person you were yesterday, whether it's like, hey, I stuck on this diet better than I did yesterday. Time to go a step harder even tomorrow. Or, I did a couple more reps in the gym, today compared to yesterday. Or I read an extra chapter, in this book, as opposed to yesterday. So I'm going to try and read another chapter tomorrow. It's all about the building blocks. Like, you're constantly adding a top piece of brick to that foundation that you're trying to build. And having that mindset will truly catapult you to where you're wanting to go in the long run. I'm a firm believer in that. And there's numerous studies and plenty of data to back that up. So never compare yourself to anyone else but you. Always remember that. It's confirmation bias. Like, that's a very big one. You know, and I don't even understand like why we do that. Like, why do we care what anyone else is like what anyone else thinks? Um, you know, as long as we're not doing anything that's hurting anyone else or negatively impacting anyone else's life, then, you know, why do we put so much weight onto someone else's opinion? Um, that's definitely something that I've never understood that, and something we'll probably read more into. But, you know, it's like the bandwagon effect. You know, it's, I feel like that's kind of human nature, though, if you really think about it. Because once again, we're, you know, human beings, whether you're an introvert by nature or an extrovert by nature, we're all still social creatures. Um, so you know, I can understand how easy it is to fall into that trap, particularly, especially with, you know, social media, Instagram, and all of that stuff. Um, you know, you get your people that you're following, and it's like you're constantly like comparing yourselves to them and stuff like that. So it's understandable. I think it can be healthy too, in a sense. You know, because like there's people that I follow on Instagram for, you know, because I find them motivational, inspiring, and stuff like that. But I don't I don't place them on, you know, such a crazy high pedestal, because I also realize that they're human beings just like I am and anyone else, and you know they put their pants on one leg at a time, unless you're weird and you like don't do that. But um, in all seriousness, it's that's why I think it can be healthy, because you can find whatever things that motivate you and follow those individuals and look for those things of inspiration. So that's definitely a positive side of it. Um, I just think it's important to, obviously, to don't base your entire life, just, you know, your decisions on the same exact decisions that they're doing, because everybody's life is different. And like at the end of the day, you are you, no one else is you. Like you're unique. We are all unique in our own individual ways, and I think that's an important thing to remember too. So I think the ultimate key in this is just being self-aware, and it goes back to being able to exercise critical thinking and being able to look at things with, you know, from multiple viewpoints, and then coming up with your own conclusion, not what everybody else is doing or what your friends are doing, or, you know, whoever the person you follow on social media is doing. Do what you want to do and base your decision on that. You know, just make sure it's an educated one. Make sure you're basing it off of facts, and don't do it just because it like, oh, it makes me feel good to say the sky is purple. Like, no, dog. Like the sky's still blue. You know. So um, I think that's the ultimate thing, just being able to do that. So, you know, going. I think this is gonna conclude our podcast for today. I appreciate everybody who, you know, listens to this, and you know, thank you so much for the support that, you know, everyone has showed and continues to show. And ultimately, you know, if anyone listening to this, you know, if you're thinking, feeling down, depressed, thinking, you know, about harming yourself or others, please, please, please seek help. There's numerous, you know, programs out there, hotlines that you can call, you know, reach out to someone. If you don't have anyone else to reach out to me. By all means, please. You know, don't do anything that, you know, is going to harm yourself. So if you don't think anyone loves you, I love you. Like straight up. So once again, thank you everybody tuning in, and I will see you next time.